just really incredible how this participatory approach is sort of more integral than what Wilbur is already doing, because it is integrating more aspects. It's more pluralistic. How do you apply this in areas like the classroom? I did a workshop with you in Asilomar in 2019.
Oh, very good.
Could you tell us about your embodiment practices, things like that?
Sure. Yes, it's all connected because normally I speak about participation in terms of co-creation, types of co-creation, like intrapersonal co-creation, like co-creation of all of parts of who we are, our bodies, our instinct, and our heart, mind, consciousness, with their own idiosyncratic intelligences and languages, and of course, like different cultures within us, no? So, and also interpersonal, we're always in relatedness with others, with the world, with nature, with archetypal forces and entities, whatever, And then transpersonal co-creation, that's the more controversial for some scholars or some practitioners, that we're co-creating with the creative mystery itself. So the creative mystery is also like unfolding, it's kind of like changing, it's kind of evolving even through human participatory inquiry. I found applications in different ways, of course, like this vision of spiritual pluralism in which people from different traditions can understand each other, not are better or worse or higher or lower or superior as wholes, but that they can be teachers and students, no? They can teach something, but also they can learn something. So we have applied this sometimes in interreligious dialogue with some success, because there is a lot of like, exclusivism and a lot of like conviction that, it's what I call a spiritual narcissism, not to be confused with narcissistic personality. I always make the example of the Dalai Lama. Very likely one of the persons that would score very, very low in any inventory of narcissistic personality created in the West, very, very low. And he's a staunch believer that his particular school of Tibetan Buddhists, the Gelugpa school, has an understanding of emptiness that not even the other Tibetan schools have. And that ultimately, through different reincarnations, all human beings will get it and will accept that truth. You see, it's a very pandemic problem, So, but anyway, coming back to second part of your question of how applications of this in the classroom, right? And embodiment work, that's very important. Like, I think this has to do with both the three forms of spiritual co-creation, no? Because have different ways to incorporate participatory knowing into the classroom, from classes that still have a strong cognitive component, like comparative mysticism, in which people need to understand the different theories of mysticism, different approaches to compare them, like constructivists, traditionalists, perennialists, all that, feminists, and but even there, there are many ways to really bring like not just your minds into a study. This is the key. Even in places like Sofia at CIS, like in which there is a lot of practice like Tai Chi Chuan or like yoga and meditation. Normally happens at the beginning and at the end, but the inquiry process, the teaching, everything is still driven by the mind. And in general, with some exceptions, So that's what I call a bricolage approach to integral education. So what I experimented for more than a decade at CIS is like, well, what if we really bring all of who we are to the inquiry process, And we do that also with somatic practices in which people really like respectfully make contact with different chakra systems, like different areas of the body, connected geographically in the body with different force of knowing, like instinctive in the hara, and here heart, emotional knowledge, and so forth, And then we'll collaboratively come together to a question, a spiritual question, or something we really want to study together. And then during those meditations, we also raise those questions. And then there will be a process of like construction of knowledge, even verbal knowledge from the multidimensional experience through drawing, through poetry, until finally like something also gets more clear for the mind and puts it out there. Beautiful process. We have published like 3 or 4 reports in different journals, some of their mainstream educational journals, and also handbooks of contemplative inquiry. So it's still ongoing, that work, even though I don't teach it anymore at university level, So that's part of the way. Of course, that's kind of in the context of more inquiry and education. But that kind of work, as you experience in Asilomar, can also be applied. And I do that in workshops here in Spain and when I travel for the integral transformation of the person, because we all came as adults, more or less mature in our minds, because all education was to our minds, right? I mean, the kindergarten was very integral education. When we're in the kindergarten, we dance, we play, we paint, you know. But then as soon as you move to a school and universities, like everything is more in the head, you know, in the mind, you know.
Yeah.
So basically, like when you through this kind of work, I call it somatic awakening or embodied spirituality or different names. We participants learn like to really reawaken the cognitive power of the instinct and the heart and the body as organs of knowledge, you know, so that they can sit together with the mind in the same table as equals in the co-creation of your life and your spiritual life.
It's amazing. It's so different and so clearly it has clear implications that are more fundamentally impactful to everyone that is participating in that practice than this sort of like lecture hall styled classroom where, you know, it's just a PowerPoint and you're expecting that the teacher has all answers to all questions. And so it's just involving everyone and every piece of you so much more.
And what a pressure for us poor teachers. We need to know everything. It's like, are you crazy? We don't know everything. No one knows everything. And sometimes people will ask a question, what year this mystic was born? It's like, I didn't memorize that, but there is like, that's why you go to encyclopedias and stuff. But anyway, of course, like I see the role of the teachers, of course, a dimension of like being a resource of knowledge. So there is some of that, you know, there is a way when you're teaching something, you normally know more than most of the students that they sign with you know. So but that's not just to indoctrinate them or just to lecture them down, like this is what it is, but to give them like resources so that they can develop their own interests, they can develop their own line of inquiry, you know. And then the other even more important dimension, we are facilitators of inquiry, especially in graduate education. I mean, I think there is a way in which at other educational levels, more content and could be more foundational. And when you move to you know, master and PhD programs, it's like other people needing to inquire to really find their own truth, their own voices in the conversation with all the resources and the dialogue with people. So I see myself as a facilitator of inquiry more than like a teacher lecturing students. Like I hate that.
Finding a way to help students find their own line of inquiry. You're helping them become, you're as powerful as the questions that you're asking. That's what you're getting out of that classroom. What questions are you asking? And what parts of yourself are you asking these questions?
Exactly.
Who are you asking? Are you asking just that one person, the teacher? Or are you asking your other co-participants in this learning space? So that's really incredible. You as a prolific scholar in this field and having really done a lot of work around this participatory approach and application and embodied learning, well, how do you remember these things? What is your process like? What kind of advice would you have for budding transpersonal scholars? A lot of the students that would be watching this in this audience are going to be young transpersonal scholars looking to enter the professional field. And so how do they stay on top of their game so that they, you know, I'm interested in your process and your habits, how are you successful in your writing in these ways?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I would say like I can say a lot about this, but I would say a few things here in this context. One is like for me, writing itself is inquiry. It's inquiry. So some people think, oh, I need to have everything figured out in my mind before I write it down. No, that's one of the worst assumptions you can have. You can get stuck over and over again. Procrastination will follow. You are going to get in loops that are not very constructive. But if you realize that the writing itself, writing out something, of course, you need to get some pre-knowledge, that Calvin and Hobbes cartoon was like, how stupid Hobbes there. They give me this homework in school to write about bats, you know, and then that was Calvin, and Hobbes says, well, and then you probably need to study some about bats, you know, in order to get it, and it's like, well, what? So I'm gonna study about bats and then write about bats? Are you crazy? So anyway, you need to have some knowledge around the topic, and that's why there is you do the readings, and then you start kind of. So that's one thing, but the other thing is also, I would say, very important to honor the gestation process in the creative process. I work with a paradigm of the 4 seasons in the creative process that we apply to academia and also to university level. And one of the things that we realize is that most students are also, because of the way the programs are structured and the pressures from the academia is like, you have to read and read and read and read and read and read, and then you have to produce, a paper. And it's like, well, where is the gestation time? When you read, you're incorporating a lot of information. And for a creative process to advance well, according to the most, organic, biomimetic, it needs a process of gestation, like more feminine, quotation marks in some way. To gestate the materials, you stop reading for a while. And then you honor that all that knowledge is going to be kind of getting in contact with your unconscious source of wisdom, and also source of wisdom of earth, and this is where the transpersonal comes in as well, because when you do this kind of more honoring the gestation, the winter, in the creative process, it's like the seed, the garden and the seed is inside the soil, and that's where it gets rooted and gets all the nutrients from the soil, from the earth. Same with this, but with the nutrients from the collective unconscious and other places, So that's very important, and then come out and share your ideas with others. And then at some point, like, okay, these are the rape fruits. You recognize what are the rape fruits from all these ideas that came from the gestation, and you took it and then you develop and write that, But in a way, like what I would say is like the very structure of academia has this kind of patriarchal ethos, in the sense that it kind of privileges the more masculine, big quotation marks, like reading, and then producing, right? And the decisions that are more about gestation and birthing of development, more feminine, at least biologically speaking, then they are marginalized. So that's
yeah. Wow, that is never brought up in any kind of coursework that I've been a part of, this gestation process. How are you digesting all of this information? So I've been in school since 2013. I've been in the field of transpersonal psychology ongoingly 4 quarters a year for now going on my 9th year. So this is 4 quarters of year back to back, 10-week quarters, classes and classes and classes and classes. And it's sold as, well, this is really helpful because you'll get through it really fast. But are we trying to get through it really fast, or are we trying to develop our own capacity to acquire in ways that align with us?
Exactly.
So that is an incredible piece. It's very important that just
but that's the tricky part, because of course, you also want to get ahead with your work and dissertation sooner than later, because you want to go on with your life and don't accumulate student debt, Of course, education should be free, should be paid by American taxes, like in most European countries and Spain, it's crazy, the American system in that regard, that is so expensive, and students get into these loans, debts, I'll not go there. But that puts a lot of pressure for people to get through their studies soon, and then there's not much time for these other dimensions. In a more enlightened society, people will graduate in different, some people will be 2 years, some people will 5 years or 7 years, depending on their organic process, We have a different kind of education.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I think a lot of students they're not taught, they just have to find it on their own, but they're not taught the skills to be good students, to be great students. No one is teaching. There's no basic courses on be a student 101, be it like here, these habits here, this is a great way to organize your information. Let's spend a week, let's spend some time on learning how to organize our information. But we just there's kind of an expectation in scholarship that the talent of the individual is going to be enough for them to figure out how to be a student on their own. Just the natural talents is going to be good enough for them to get through. And
Yeah, it doesn't
like
go that
everything,
way. It
like
doesn't go
everything
that way.
else
Yeah.
in scholarship, it's a built skill. So so
Exactly. Yeah, I used to teach a course at CIS called Theoretical Research in the Human Sciences for PhD students, and unpacking the different logics of inquiry that are more theoretical, not qualitative or quantitative. And I included a lot of that, like, you know, like when teaching students for, you know, public speaking tips, you know, like different ways you can speak different tips. Like students love that, you know, because there's things that they don't get anywhere, you know. So I'm totally with you.